Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
If you didn't know before, now you know why they call this the Fun Belt.
Very excited about the Sun Belt.
You know, while other conferences have been breaking up, our conference has become stronger.
The state of Sun Belt football is the strongest in our history.
I saw Fun Belt Conference, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I got to join the show. This sounds a lot of fun.
Dusty Thibodeaux, Warhawk Report, Shane Mettlen of the Daily News Record, and Jeremy Harper of Hellraiser coming for a good realignment. And guys, how fitting is it that Oppenheimer is one of the top movies in the U.S. as we talk about realignment, where it really looks like, in his own words, the bigger the star, the bigger it falls.
Wow.
There's no more Pac-10. There's no more Pac-12, Pac-14. It is, as somebody has already created on the internet, the Pac-4.
Who's
and that's
left?
where we are.
Who's left? Do you remember? Do you have that in front of you?
If I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
Wazoo, Oregon State,
Yeah.
Stanford, and Cal.
Of the four of those, what is the most valuable property?
Stanford.
Yeah,
I think Stanford.
I'm a little surprised that Stanford was left all out of this. Although Stanford is kind of like, you know, their identity is the Pac-12. I'm sure they were the ones saying, guys, where are you going?
I think they were kind of the ones who were like, this can't happen to me. And then it did to a certain degree. I think they resisted a lot of the options that were out there, as far as like, even go back in a year or more to like making a deal with the Big 12 or different things. I think they like resisted that, thinking the Pac-12 was where they wanted to be, both athletically and academically, probably. And I think it really backfired on them.
I saw something go through social media where it started off, you know, like they made a good point. They said there should be a merger between the Pac-10 or the Pac-4 as it is now and the Mountain West. And I was like, yeah, there should be a merger. And then it went on to say, but would everybody from the Mountain West make the cut? And that just kind of made me laugh. I was like, who's the Pac-4 to dictate who gets to stay in the Mountain West? Well, what power do they have coming into that negotiation?
I feel like it's going to be sort of like people will just want to buy the Pac-12 name, like, or the Pac whatever name it ends up being. Like, that might have some value. They're still, you know, I think if they can save their thing, can you take their like autonomy status away from them? And we'll get into this, but like I keep hearing everybody say like, well, they're not going to be a Power 5 conference anymore. Well, they're going to be a Power 5 conference for 2023. It's the same league. And after 2023, nobody's a Power 5 conference, really. I mean, that designation like doesn't matter at all when it comes to like on-field product in the playoff after 2024. So the whole debate about whether they remain a Power 5 conference, to me, like is a kind of a pointless thing. That whole scenario of Power 5 versus Group of 5 is not going to exist by the time all these teams are gone.
Yeah, you know what? That didn't even like occur to me about the autonomy thing. Yeah, who gets to get that branding now? If you only have a Pac-12 with 4 people in it, how does that work now?
I think that's why you might see the Mountain West. I've even seen where like they're saying like the Mountain West commissioner will take over, but they'll keep the Pac-10 or however many teams they have named, because that name like has some value, and that autonomy status has some value. But
yeah, I agree with that. But here's the important question, and I'm going to throw it to Thibz for this one. Of those 4, which one belongs in the Sun Belt?
None. They're way out of our league. And I mean that literally once again, it goes back to it, Jeremy, from the get. If we're going to add Cal, Oregon State, Stanford, or Wazoo, why not Idaho again?
All right. Oh,
I mean,
that's.
Well, I mean, Idaho and Wazoo, at least you get the travel partners since they're, 15
They're
miles
like-
apart
yeah,
or
I was gonna
something like
say.
that.
Well, another thing that went through the Twitter sphere as all this was going down was there was a lot of people commenting about how good a job the G5, especially the Sun Belt, was doing in maintaining that manageable footprint and creating those regional rivals, and how lost the Power Five has become in truly understanding what makes college football great. I mean, is anybody really going to be like gung-ho to see Rutgers and Oregon play a conference match? I mean, there's no hatred, there's no heat in this conference anymore. I mean, what is happening here? Why can't they understand this?
I don't know. It's I feel like we're seeing the bubble burst to some degree. Like this is almost like a reset where I think we're gonna like maybe see another shakeup down the line again when, like you said, people realize they don't really like these conferences that much. And I think a lot of teams are probably going to realize they don't like being in these conferences very much. One thing, I've talked to Carl Benson about, who our friend Carl Benson, who was the Sun Belt commissioner. Before that, he was the WAC commissioner when they went nation or made an attempt to go nationwide, essentially. And he's come around and said, he's admitted it. I mean, he's like saying that was a huge mistake. That was the end of the conference when we got too spread out geographically. And I know it's a little different for if you're the Big 10 or the Big 12, but like they're all happy right now. But you even see it on Twitter to some degree. Kansas and Arizona fans are already arguing about whether the Big 12 tournament should be in Kansas City or Las Vegas. Like it's already beginning, like those things that happen when these schools are not geographically aligned at all. And, Central Florida is never going to agree with BYU on everything once this all shakes out. Like once the honeymoon's over, I don't know these nationwide conferences. They've never worked before. I'm not sure why they're going to work now.
Well, let me ask you this, Shane. You're talking about a honeymoon, and there might be a honeymoon between the commissioners or the commissioner and the I don't know, the man, or that we call them the athletic directors of the teams. But do the fans really? Did any fan really want any of this? I mean, if I'm a Big 12 person, I mean, I kind of wanted Colorado and maybe Arizona, because there is sort of some regional heat there. But did we really want to get these other brands out there? Is that what we wanted, these mega conferences? I mean, I had argued that the Sun Belt needs to get really big, but only as a matter of survival. These guys didn't even have to do that. Do the fans want this, Shane?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's going to be some good rivalries in these like conferences to some degree. Like you look at the new Big 12 map, and you just start looking at the west side of it, and you're like, oh, Arizona State, Colorado, BYU, Utah, and then into Kansas State, Oklahoma State. That all kind of makes sense. But then you look at the wider map, and you're like, oh, there's UCF out here. Like, what the hell are they doing? Like, it's just kind of crazy.
So are we all in agreement, though, that we think that this round of realignment, shuffling, whatever you want to call it, I don't see where the Sun Belt really is in the mix of any of this. I don't see really anybody being added, because I think the American still has their teams intact. And I think the Sun Belt is kind of seeing, is it really relevant if Southern Miss, for instance, were to be contacted by the Pac-12? Is that really a good fit? Or is it the Sun Belt, where you kind of have that rivalry and the ease of travel? Your fans are excited about being able to face the Cajuns, face ULM, face Troy, and everything else. Or am I just kind of eyes in the sky and thinking that everybody's holding hands singing Kumbaya?
Here, I'm not sure if this answers your question at all, Thibs, but I think it does. Here's the only thing I think the Sun Belt gets where it begins to affect the Sun Belt, is that it's the one Power 5 conference nobody's really thinking about, except when Florida State starts grousing on in public, and that's the ACC. Now, what happens if the ACC sees what's happening with the Big 12, with the Big 10, and say, okay, we need to get big too if we're going to survive, or we're just going to become pieces from them. So what do? They might start grabbing some guys like, I don't know, Appalachian State, for instance, or perhaps Memphis or whatever. And then isn't that when the Sun Belt has to make their own decisions? Do they have to start poaching some guys too from CSA and the American? Is that the only scenario where the Sun Belt is affected by this?
Well, but let's look at it. The only teams that we've really heard possibly wanting out of the ACC is Miami and Florida State. That's it. That's the only two teams that are really actively wanting out, and they want out because they won in the SEC.
I've heard Clemson. I hear Clemson is sort of behind the scenes trying to get in the SEC too. But that, again, that might just be more rumor than actual fact.
But my point being is, if we didn't want FAU, FIU in the league, why would we want Miami and Florida State? They don't fit the footprint. Well, maybe Florida State does, but definitely not the U. And then beyond that, you know, I love some good old Fun Belt. I mean, hell, we started the podcast about it. We go to New Orleans, we travel around the nation for the games. But is that really in the best interest of Florida State or Miami to join the Sun Belt?
Oh, no. But I'm not saying those guys join the Sun Belt. I'm saying that the ACC ends up getting bigger, and then we end up grabbing some guys just because they're floating out in the ether and they have no place to go, like a Memphis, like a Eastern Carolina, like somebody like that might not fit profiles for anybody else but the Sun Belt.
I think the ACC has to get pretty much Pac-12 here before it really starts to impact the Sun Belt too much. I mean, because they're not going. Virginia is not inviting JMU or ODU into the club anytime soon. And UNC is not inviting App State into the club unless it's a desperation.
That's a good
those
point.
schools are gone, then maybe things change. But I mean, I think that I think the ACC's got to really implode before they start looking for Sun Belt teams, which is why I think everybody in the Sun Belt's pretty confident that they can sit back and watch this play out, see if the Pac-12, Pac-4, well, what are we going to call it for now?
I call it the Pac-0.
They're still officially the Pac-12, but if the Pac grabs any, because of the buyouts for the Mountain West, I would not be surprised at all if the Pac grabs 2 to 4 AAC teams quickly, just so they continue to exist.
Wow.
And then they can wait for things to shake out with the Mountain West a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that would not surprise me at all if they go for like a Memphis, SMU, Tulane, Rice type of deal or something. And then that's where I think it might start to affect the Sun Belt is, okay, who wants to stay in the American if they lose those teams? Does an East Carolina, does a UAB, or any of these teams that are already in the Sun Belt footprint, what do they do if they start losing more teams?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like we've come full circle, and it's now the late 90s. If you remember, that's when we had everyone was a 1A independent. I swear it was Middle Tennessee, Arkansas State, ULM, Lafayette, North Texas was in the Big South or the Big West or whatever they were for a while. And then, of course, Notre Dame. But I mean, is that the new thing, that really the conferences don't really matter and that everyone just kind of pulls a Notre Dame and goes 1A independent?
I don't think so. Because I mean, there's talk about Stanford, like, would they be better off going independent, or would they want to go independent? But the only teams that going independent really worked for was Notre Dame and BYU, where they could get their own TV deals. Is Stanford going to get, like, are they going to get ESPN to play them for their games? I don't think Stanford alone can do that. Like, even though, I mean, it's a pretty good brand, but like, I don't think, I don't see anybody being like, okay, well, we got to pay, $20 million a year to get Stanford football games. Like, it's just not the same as those teams that are kind of representing an entire religion across the country. I mean, nobody else wants to be independent anymore. UConn doesn't want to be independent. UMass doesn't want to be independent. Liberty got out as soon as they had an opportunity.
I'm not sure if Notre Dame wants to. I mean, Notre Dame says they do, but aren't they pretty much ACC anyway? Shouldn't they just go ahead and join the ACC and make it official?
I think
No,
so.
I mean, there's openings now in the Pac-4.
All right, here's a good Pac-4 question. Who gets Bill Walton now?
Yeah. Never thought I'd say poor Bill Walton.
I like Bill Walton. I don't necessarily like a whole game of Bill Walton. I like him in small doses, but when it's the whole game, I'm like, you're tearing me apart. But maybe some other conference needs to pick him up. Maybe the Sun Belt has some room for Bill Walton. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, I was going to get
the Conference of Champions.
Since all of this is about TV, and the big question is like, what if the Pac-4 goes away or whatever, or doesn't get a TV deal? What's going to be on late at night?
Yeah, that's right.
And Bill Walton doing a Sun Belt game late at night.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like Bill Walton as a color guy.
Some people do.
But if you want to attract a little attention to the conference, the JMU had a thing. This was many years ago. This is when Lefty Driesell, Hall of Famer Lefty Driesell, was coaching at JMU. He got, and this is when schools could kind of like negotiate their own TV stuff. He got ESPN to broadcast JMU games if they played them at midnight. And so he would play like a midnight game once a year if he could. And what he did then was basically encourage everybody to get absolutely loaded all day.
Yeah, all right.
Before midnight. And the atmospheres were crazy. Richmond stopped playing them at midnight because like there's just too many drunk people. If ESPN wants some late night content, I'm thinking every Sun Belt team in a variety of sports could volunteer to play one midnight game a year.
That would
make it a huge thing.
That would be so Mac.
Yeah, but like midnight, it's like party time, and you do it once a year. You make it like a huge thing, huge event.
All right,
totally embrace it. Nobody has to do it more than once a year.
I can see the sophisticates of JMU doing that. Here would be the response at Arkansas State. Man, I gotta get up in the morning, man. I got church on Sunday. There ain't no way I'm staying up till midnight to watch no game. That is exactly what Arkansas State fans would say to that. I don't know if ULM fans would be on board. I know Louisiana's, they're used to staying up late and doing shit. So maybe those guys would be on board.
There's hunting to be had on Sunday morning.
I forgot. Yeah, you're talking about hunting season, Shane. Are you nuts?
Okay.
Oh,
that right there. I mean, that kills attendance, let alone people trying to tune in.
Well, so this was a basketball game that JMU did it, but they were absolutely packed with drunk kids.
What kind of school is James Madison, Thibz?
I think I just told you what kind of school it is.
What did we just hitch our wagon to? Oh my God, it sounds like Vice going on there and Harrisonburg. I think we need to send in Crockett and Tubbs to do an undercover investigation.
I think I'm glad we're finally getting some stank and character into the league.
We need some stinking character. Yeah. But speaking of Mac,
wait, how do you say Mac and stank and character?
No, at one point I had mentioned Mac because I said midnight games would be so Mac. I mean, like they do those Tuesday night games. That's kind of their brand, or whatever. They'll do wonky things. But I saw yet another thing on the Twitters which I know is X now. I gotta change my vernacular on that.
Yeah, we'll get banned.
Yeah, I probably would. That they've pretty much stayed the same. Like they have the same membership since something like 1996. And I was thinking about that. Yeah. Have they not changed at all in like 3 decades?
They added
None.
Buffalo more recently than that, I think, but I don't think they've like made any big changes. Like
They just
nothing
kind
too
of
crazy.
they just kind of put their heads down and keep powering through. Nobody touches them. They don't touch anybody else. Why can't we be more like the MAC? Like the whole world. Why can't the world be more like the MAC? Just mind their own business, staying in their lanes, providing the entertainment and value where they can provide entertainment and value. Well, why can't we learn more lessons from the MAC?
Because Keith Gill won't wear a Phantom of the Opera mask and cape or play a guitar, much like their commish does.
Oh, yeah. I forget. You loved that, Thibz. I remember when he did that. You thought that was outstanding.
I do. I think it's amazing, but that's I think that's the Matt character that we all need, that we all want.
Yeah, and maybe that's what's missing from big time college football. It's so wrapped up right now in the money and the broadcast deals. And you guys like you and I, just fans, just guys who pay our money for the merchandise and for the tickets and for what have you. We just have to do whatever they want to do, right? And I really think it's too bad. I honestly don't give a shit what Power 5 conferences do, because they've been trashing G5 conferences for as long as I can remember, and they've never been any help to us. But I cannot believe that the Pac-12, in all their years of building up that brand, of creating that identity, of being known as that sort of West Coast influence in football, basketball, baseball, they just abandoned it. Like, it seemed like they did it overnight, guys. It's just kind of astounding to me. Like, none of that, what they built for so long, it just meant nothing. Zero.
Hey.
Should I be this emotional about that?
When the Pac-4 refused to participate in the Independence Bowl, that was their downfall.
I guess that could be it.
I got to the point though where like nothing surprised me about a decade ago.
Okay.
So you guys are alums of the schools you cover.
Sure.
I am not. I grew up rooting for Kansas Jayhawks, and I went to school there, and so I got a little bit of the like both sides of the G5 P5 table here. And once it was completely unfathomable to me that we got to a point where Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska were playing in 3 separate conferences. I thought those schools were completely inseparable, like long-time rivals, and some more friendly than others. But like I would have never expected those 3 schools would not be in the same conference, let alone 3 separate conferences. Once that happened, I got to the point where nothing really surprised me as far as like conference realignment. Like, and then I thought like, well, anything's possible.
Yeah,
And
maybe that's the moment. Maybe that's the moment when we decided that there was no unifying link that kept us together. The only link was money.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, the fact that it just like basically, like this stuff used to happen over a course of years, right? Like even I'm talking about Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri. First it was like, Nebraska leaves, and then like a couple years later, Missouri leaves, and then the Big 12 does a bunch of other stuff, and you get to where they are now. Like this all kind of has happened. Like, I mean, I know there was stuff happening in the background, but those schools all made up their minds basically in a 24-hour period to leave. And that's like crazy for half of a conference to do that, like that fast.
But that tells me that there was more going on behind the scenes than what they've let on, and that there was that much resentment, animosity, and that they were all also fearing what was going to happen long term with the media rights.
Yeah, and what was it? Last they landed on media rights was, well, we're going to be on Apple TV. Did I oversimplify that?
No, that was their best offer. It was my favorite quote was from, I think it was the Arizona State president. Arizona State's kind of going to the Big 12 very begrudgingly.
Yeah.
They did not want this to happen, and they kind of made it clear that they're not that happy they're going to the Big 12, which is going back to my theory that this is not going to work out long term. But he had some quote that the Apple deal was a 23rd century Star Trek type of technological situation. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that means.
Wow.
But we're still in the 21st century, I think. So not sure how that's going to work.
Arizona
out.
State, they're at least 2 centuries ahead of us. You know what, though? I the more I thought about that, though, I was kind of ragging on Apple. If everything really is going to streaming, it kind of is. I mean, everybody wants that big Fox deal or that ESPN deal, but who's to say that Apple couldn't put together enough viewers to make that worthwhile? I don't know. It could have. I mean, to give credit for CUSA for trying to make Twitter a football platform. I mean, that was ahead of their
Facebook.
And Facebook is. You had to go to Facebook to watch SCUSA. But at the time, it was like, you know what? All right, there's some innovative thinking there. It's not that innovative to say, let's put it on Apple TV. I mean,
I think everybody still needs some combination of even the Sun Belt, where we all love ESPN Plus.
Sure.
We still want to have that, we're still really excited the championship game might be on ABC. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think giving up that linear TV option entirely is still probably pretty tough. And from what I've read, they were going to have to meet some pretty tough subscription numbers to really start getting paid for that Apple TV thing.
Any of you guys on Apple TV?
No, I am.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I probably watched some Pack After Dark.
I did watch Hijack, though. Hijack was a good series.
You know what?
Give me a plug.
I tried to watch Hijack. I got through, I think, most of it. But goddamn, when's something going to happen in that show, Thibz? Did something finally happen?
In Hijack?
Yeah.
It's a great show. It's a miniseries.
I swear I went through 3 episodes of them trying to figure out if the bullets were real or not. It's like, when is this going to come to a head?
It's important.
Okay. All right. So what have we decided? What's the lesson that we've learned here? That the Sun Belt is in good shape, right?
Thank you, Commissioner Gill.
Do you think Commissioner Gill is doing the right thing by just keeping his cards on the table and saying we're standing pat?
I do. I mean, I think we've kicked it around enough, though, that, we know what schools we would be willing to say, oh, yeah, we definitely want to add them. But for the most part, stay pat, stay the course, and stay 14 strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing about it is you can kind of let things play out and see where those schools you might be interested are at in a year or two. And you're also in a pretty good situation where I think one of the biggest things about all of this for the Sun Belt that we haven't talked quite as much about is what the playoff situation is going to be in a couple of years. And for at least 2 years, that's the contract for the initial 12-team playoff. For at least 2 years, if a conference like the Pac-4 or the Mountain West, if one of those disappears because they merge or something, that opens up another spot in the playoff. I mean, I'm sure the SEC and the Big Ten will probably try to get that changed by the time they renegotiate the next round when the TV deal's up. But for 2 years, you got that really good opportunity if you're in the Sun Belt to get somebody in and let them make some noise.
That's a good point. Yeah, wasn't that the thing we screamed about the longest? Was for it to expand the playoffs so it included all the conference champions. And
but
now we're not going to have that.
You knew that wasn't meant for us. That was for them. That was for the P5 or the P4 or whatever we're calling them now.
My guess is eventually the SEC and the Big Ten will probably fight for. So right now it's going to be like the top 6 get an automatic berth.
Yeah.
If there's 9 conferences instead of 10, maybe they'll do like the top 5 get an automatic berth, and the top 2 rated conference, maybe they get a second automatic berth, would be my guess of how this is going to go, because the SEC and the Big Ten are going to have all the power eventually. And they're going to want to guarantee that they're going to get 2 teams in 2 to 3 teams in the vast majority of the time. So I think the Sun Belt playoff wise is probably sitting pretty good as that moves forward to 12 team.
Have we kicked that horse enough?
Yeah, my toes hurt.
And now for plugs, promos, parting shots. Jeremy, please give it to us.
You know, like a couple years ago, more precisely April 27th of 2022, I sat down after that most recent spate of realignment and chaos that happened with the college football. I wrote a brief history of the destruction of college football on howraiser.com. You can find it. A brief history of destruction of college football. And I kind of outlined a sort of sloppy timeline of how it got to be where we are today. Guys, what do you think is, to you, what is that first domino that fell, that started this realignment mess? What was that first domino?
The Texas, Oklahoma finally ripping the Band-Aid off that they're going to the SEC.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I don't know. I think you could go back even further to maybe the ACC taking teams from the Big East.
Ooh, yeah.
Taking Miami, Virginia Tech, and those teams.
I went back all the way to 1979. To me, that's when the first domino hit. And that's when 30,000 viewers tuned in for the launch of ESPN. ESPN realized that anything that they put on, people are going to watch. And then they realized any football they put on, people were going to watch. Whether it was Hawaii and, I don't know, Boise State late at night or whatever, or if it was a Pac-12 game or an SEC game, they were the ones that realized this 24-hour sports coverage. That's when they realized the appetite that Americans have for sport is almost infinite. And they will pay through the nose to get those broadcast rights. And that's when college football went from being something that was, where regional appeal and regional rooting interest became a business. And to me, it's that launch of ESPN that really started it. And I had a couple other sort of tipping points. Some of them I thought were kind of interesting. 1991, for instance, when NBC secured that exclusive television rights to Notre Dame. 1996, when Steve Spurrier became the first $1 million football coach. I mean, before Steve Spurrier, coaches were making reasonable money, right? Now, how much is Saban making now? He's almost making $20 million a year. And where's that money coming from? It's not coming from broadcast rights or college tuition. It's coming from people like me and you buying merchandise, buying cable packages, buying, the things that make college football programs go, and they have to raise the prices. And we just keep paying the money. We're part of the problem. So anyway, check out howraiser.com, a brief history of the destruction of college football. You'll see plenty of flashpoints that have led us to the mess we are in today.
Shane, what do you have for us?
I'm going to build off that a little bit.
Ooh.
Since we're doing some realignment, I'll have realignment parting shot. I think one thing, and I've pitched a story idea somewhere, so I won't get too far into it, but there are a lot of things, like Jeremy has said, there were a lot of moments, going back, to the dawn of ESPN that led us to this. I think one thing people don't think about as much too is when the focus shifted so totally to football. I've been reading this in the Raleigh newspaper here the last week or two, where they've been writing about various things and Florida State possibly leaving the ACC and everything. And they point out that in the 90s, ACC basketball was as big a television draw as SEC football. They were both huge. And you can kind of trace that back to first, maybe we should blame the NBA a little bit for all of this.
All right, go on.
First, the NBA started drafting high school kids willy-nilly.
Oh,
So they weren't going to college. And so
Yes.
LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett never played for North Carolina and Ohio State and all these places where they would have been huge TV draws.
yes.
And then they went to the one and done rule. So you got them for a little bit, but there was such rapid turnover. I think people lost a lot of interest in college basketball around the time that this all shifted to let's get as much football TV money as we possibly can. And then people started, and that was when the ACC started grabbing Miami and Virginia Tech and Syracuse and everybody. I think, you know, the NBA obviously has got their own agendas, and it's not to like save college sports necessarily, but I think that's maybe an underappreciated factor among many factors of how we got to where we are right now.
What a twist that would be, Shane. A story about how the destruction of college football, what we are seeing today is the result of the NBA. That is outstanding. Okay. You can't beat this, Thibz. You can try.
I know.
want you to.
I feel like Billy Madison when he's in the contest there against the guy Eric for the company, and he plays like the cello or whatever, and Billy grabs a recorder and blows into it and goes, "He's good." That's how I feel.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy, comfy. I'm cozy, cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. Blisters. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.